Hello, and welcome to the online book club. Today, we are beginning a book that has been one of my lifetime favorites. I became acquainted with this book before I learned to read. My mother read it to me before I ever went to school. And I remember using quotes from this book at significant points in my life for my entire life. I'll tell you about those moments when we get to the various parts of the book. This is one of those books that helps a person interpret their life. Helps them interpret their life. Interpret. When something happens, if it reminds you of something that happened in literature, if it can be described by beautiful words that you have read in a book, somehow it makes your experience seem beautiful and transcendent. That's one of the best functions of literature, to help us reinterpret our life. Things that seem terrible can become valuable in the light of the great themes of literature. This book contains so much that has helped me live my life in a way that was beautiful and elegant and polite and kind and good. I can't wait to share it with you. Now, I want to tell you this book is in Portuguese, and many people use this book in language study because it has been translated into about 250 languages, and it has been beloved in all those languages. It was originally written in French, and it's been translated into English by Catherine Peters, I think, very beautifully. Catherine Woods. And the English translation is so beautiful that many translators begin with the English translation and then move into other translations instead of beginning with the French. So I can't wait to share this with you. I'll begin right now, and I'll stop freely to share with you the things I've loved in this book. I hope you will love it, and I hope you will learn some English from it. God bless you as we study this book. The Little Prince by Antonie de Saint-Exupéry. First, let me tell you a little bit about who the author is. He was a French, excuse me, I'm putting my socks back on. It's so cold in here. It's so cold here that I dressed really warmly, but I made a fire before class, and then it got hot, so I took off my socks. Now it's getting cold again. Sorry. Okay, the author was a French aristocrat. That means he was a nobleman. He was pretty rich. And he was also a poet and a novelist and a pilot. In fact, he is the pilot in this story. This is an autobiographical story. And he was married to a woman who was quite a bit like a rose. So Antonie de Saint-Exupéry actually is the Little Prince and the pilot. It's very autobiographical. Okay, here we go. Beginning with the dedication. To Leon Worth, a friend of his from childhood. I ask the indulgence of the children who may read this book. I ask the indulgence means I'm asking forgiveness because I'm doing something a little bit offensive. I ask you to be patient with me. That's what it means to say I'm asking for your indulgence. It means please be patient. I ask the indulgence of the children who may read this book for dedicating it to a grown-up. I have a serious reason. He is the best friend I have in the world. I have another reason. This grown-up understands everything, even books about children. I have a third reason. He lives in France, where he is hungry and cold. He needs cheering up. If all these reasons are not enough, I will dedicate the book to the child from whom this grown-up grew. All grown-ups were once children, though few of them remember it. And so I correct my dedication to Leon Worth when he was a little boy. Excuse me, one moment, please. Keys? They should be there. Someone is raiding my purse right now. Stealing my keys, preparatory to stealing my car. He has fled the scene, so we can go on with our class. Okay, this dedication, I don't know if you can tell because you are not a native speaker. It is written in very simple English. It is written as though to a child. The sentence structure is simple and direct and beautiful. It's a simple, melodious, sort of beautiful writing. He is dedicating the book to a grown-up, an adult, even though it is a book for children. This is a theme throughout the book, grown-ups versus children. And it reminds me of the saying of Jesus that you must become like a child in order to inherit the kingdom. This is something that Christians meditate on. What does it mean to become like a child? Does it mean to become childish, meaning bad temper, selfish, crying if you don't get your way? Or does it mean something else? This is a book about how to be childlike. There's a difference between being childish. Childish means acting like a child in a bad way. Childish is a type of behavior which is immature. This is negative. Then you have the word childlike. This means acting like a child in a good way, with all of the attributes of youth and innocence, which are good and desirable, that which we would like to be. So, if you want to insult someone, say they are childish. If you want to honor someone and describe them positively, you could say they are childlike. And it means innocent and pure and good and vulnerable. Maybe. But childlike is good. Okay. So he has three reasons. The first is a serious reason, an important reason, the most important reason. He is the best friend I have. That's the kind of thing. Simple, honest, good truth. The second reason, he understands everything, even books about children. Occasionally you meet an adult who can understand and remember what it was to be a child. And that adult can relate to children and can give something to a child in terms of experience and wisdom. But most adults don't speak the language of childhood and therefore can't really help. And a third reason, he lives in France where he is hungry and cold. He needs cheering up. He needs to be cheered up. So This is also the kind of thing that makes me happy. He is hungry and cold. He needs to be cheered up. So I'll dedicate this book to him. Okay, chapter 1. By the way, the chapter titles that you have in your PDF are not original. They're not, the original book, I don't believe, had any chapter titles. They were just went right into it. So my book, as you see, has no chapter title at all, just the picture. Let me see what your chapter title says. We are introduced to the narrator, a pilot, and his ideas about grown-ups. Okay. Once when I was 6 years old, I saw a magnificent picture in a book called True Stories from Nature, about the primeval forest. A magnificent picture that is very evocative of emotion. This writing is what we call lyric or lyric prose. Lyric means evocative of great emotion, very emotional. The word magnificent conjures cathedrals and temples and kings and great things. A magnificent picture of the primeval forest. Primeval means untouched, virgin, in the dawn of time. And for me, it has a numinous sort of a feel, mainly because of this book. This book was read to me before I knew what primeval meant. So for me, it meant deep and dark and untouched and full of smells and sounds and deep colors. Primeval, or very early in history, but really it means untouched. So it was a book called True Stories from Nature about the primeval forest. It was a picture of a boa constrictor in the act of swallowing an animal. In the act means at that very moment he is doing it. Caught in the act. If a criminal is caught in the act, then there is no question of guilt. He has been caught in the act means caught red-handed. Red-handed. That means caught in the act. Caught in the act. Boa constrictors. Let's see. It was a picture of a boa constrictor caught in the act of swallowing an animal. Here is a copy of the drawing. You have it on your PDF. It does look magnificent. In the book it said, boa constrictors swallow their prey whole. That means to swallow something whole means without chewing. No chewing, it just goes straight down, like we swallow a pill. Boa constrictors swallow their prey whole, without chewing it. After that, they are not able to move, and they sleep through the 6 months they need for digestion. I pondered deeply then over the adventures of the jungle. Isn't that like a child? To ponder deeply some piece of information that he learns about the jungle or about anything. This is an aspect of being childlike, to ponder deeply. And after some work with a colored pencil, I succeeded in making my first drawing, my drawing number 1. It looked like this. And you have a picture of it. My drawing number 1. All in capitals means he gave it a title, a name. It has an identity. This was not a scribble. This was not his first drawing that he ever did, but this was his first finished work. And he gave it a title, My Drawing Number 1. I showed my masterpiece to the grown-ups and asked them whether the drawing frightened them. But they answered, "Frightened? Why should anyone be frightened by a hat?" My drawing was not a picture of a hat. It was a picture of a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. You can see the elephant is still alive. But since the grown-ups were not able to understand it, I made another drawing. I drew the inside of a boa constrictor so the grown-ups could see it clearly. They always need to have things explained. My drawing number 2 looked like this. The grown-ups' response this time was to advise me to lay aside my drawings of boa constrictors, whether from the inside or the outside, and devote myself instead to geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar. Doesn't that sound like a grown-up? Just brushing the kid off, instead of entering in to what he has pondered deeply and made a masterpiece of. That is why at the age of 6, I gave up what might have been a magnificent career as a painter. I had been disheartened by the failure of my drawing number 1 and my drawing number 2. Excuse me, grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it is tiresome for children to be always and forever explaining to them. So then I chose another profession and learned to pilot airplanes. Airplanes were brand new when he was writing. I have flown a little over all parts of the world, and it is true that geography has been very useful to me. At a glance, I can distinguish China from Arizona. If one gets lost in the night, such knowledge is valuable. I love that. It's sweet. It's funny. China and Arizona. Arizona is a state in the United States, and you cannot look from the air down at the ground and see Arizona because there's no boundaries. And China is enormous, and it's in a total another part of the world. Did you hear what I just said? A total another part. This is a little English thing. It's in a total another part of the world. I want to point this out to you because you cannot write this. The way you would write it is you would say it's in a totally other part. And you wouldn't even write that. This is only spoken. Really, this word is another. China is in another part of the world. When I insert the word total right here, it's a total another part. It's what we call an infix. You know, prefix, suffix, infix. A prefix puts something in the beginning, like if you have earthly, you could say unearthly, unearthly, prefix. Or if you have earth, you could add ly. That's a suffix. Earthly, suffix. Well, if you put something in the middle, it's called an infix. And any book about English will tell you we do not have infixes. We only have prefixes and suffixes. Except when someone gets excited. And then, sometimes, they will infix an adjective or an adverb. a totally another part of the world. I was excited, so I put in an infix. China, Arizona. Such knowledge is useful when you are lost at night. This author wrote a book called Night Flight. He used to fly long missions, and he would use the time for meditation, and he loved to fly at night in the dark. And of course, in the dark, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between China and Arizona, even if there were borders from the air. Because it's night, you can't see. So the whole thing is very funny, and very simple, and very sweet. In the course of this life, I have had a great many encounters with a great many people who have been concerned with matters of consequence. Matters of consequence is a phrase that is used in this book a lot, but nowhere else. Nobody talks about being concerned with matters of consequence. It means important things, serious things. And if I say to someone, I'm busy with matters of consequence, I am referring to the book. I'm not, people really don't say that. But it's really important in this book, and it means things which I consider to be important. But from a child's perspective, it is not important to do many of the things adults do. From a child's perspective, there's nothing more important at a given moment than examining a flower, or looking at a cloud, or taking a nap. Whatever is the activity of the moment is the thing to do. And grown-ups are often concerned with matters which are incomprehensible and unimportant to children. So, in my life, I've had a great many encounters, lots of encounters, with a great many people who have been concerned with matters of consequence. I have lived a great deal among grown-ups. I've seen them intimately, close at hand. In other words, he knows grown-ups well. And that hasn't much improved my opinion of them. He doesn't like grown-ups. Whenever I met one of them, who seemed to me at all clear-sighted, I tried the experiment of showing him my drawing number 1, which I have always kept. I would try to find out, if this was a person of true understanding. I would try to find out, the word so means this way. By this means, I would try to find out if this was a person of understanding, true understanding. But whoever it was, he or she would always say, that is a hat. And then I would never talk to that person about boa constrictors or primeval forests or stars. I would bring myself down to his level. I would talk to him about bridge. Bridge is a card game played by wealthy people, rich people, who are idle and bored and have nothing better to do. It's a very complicated card game that goes on for a long time. So it fills up a lot of time and gives people a chance to really compete. Bridge. Golf. Golf also is a game for the rich. And politics for the powerful. And neckties. Neckties are ties worn by men who are dressed up, going to the office, busy with matters of consequence. And the grown-up would be greatly pleased to have met such a sensible man. When I was in the first grade, the nun who was teaching us, her name was Sister Kala Mann. She was reading us this book, and when she got the picture of drawing number 1, she she called us each up to her desk, one by one, and showed it to us and said, "What do you think this is a picture of?" And we were little children. And when I saw it, I said, well, the children were all thinking, they didn't know what it was. But when I saw it, I said, "I know what that is. That's a snake. That's a snake with something in it." And it's because my mother had read me the story. So she tried her diagnostic test on us children, and I passed it. First grade, 6 years old. Chapter 2. So I lived my life alone, without anyone I could really talk to. Do you live your life alone? Do you have anyone you can really talk to? Who can you really talk to? What is it about that person that gives them true understanding? Everybody thought he was a sensible man, but he was alone because he couldn't speak to them of boa constrictors or primeval forests or stars, the things he had pondered. So I lived my life alone without anyone that I could really talk to, He could talk to everybody about surface things, but to really talk to someone means speak of the heart, something deep in your heart. Until I had an accident with my plane in the desert of Sahara 6 years ago. In fact, Antoine de Saint-Exupéry did have an accident in the desert of the Sahara 6 years before writing this, and he and his mechanic survived the accident, but they only had 1 day's worth of water, and they were found in 3 days, dehydrated and hallucinating. And this was the original inspiration for this. Something was broken in my engine, and as I had with me neither a mechanic nor any passengers, in fact he did have someone with him, but this is a story, I set myself to attempt the difficult repairs all alone. It was a question of life or death for me. I had scarcely enough drinking water to last a week. He actually only had a day. The first night then, I went to sleep on the sand 1,000 miles from any human habitation. I was more isolated than a shipwrecked soldier on a raft in the middle of the ocean. Totally alone, in a sea of sand, under 1,000,000 stars. Thus you can imagine my amazement at sunrise when I was awakened by an odd little voice. It said, "If you please, draw me a sheep." I have pondered deeply on this question of why he needed a sheep, why he wanted a sheep. This is a question I can't answer, why the little prince wanted a sheep. You know, when, a sheep is an image of a soft, comforting creature, dependent and sweet and non-aggressive. It also eats plants. And he planned on taking it back with him to his country. Let's continue. I actually don't want to read the whole thing to you because it'll take too long. So he goes on and asks for a sheep, and the author draws several sheep, none of which pass muster. Pass muster. Let me give you that vocabulary. Pass muster means they're not good enough. So he draws him several sheep, none of which pass muster. That's like from the army, when you gather the troops together, and if someone isn't fit, he has to go back. So, none of which passed muster. Finally, he gave him a box and said, "Your sheep is in the box." And the little prince was thrilled, very happy. And that is how the pilot made the acquaintance of the little prince. It took the pilot a long time to learn anything about the prince, and some of what he thinks he learned may be wrong, because the little prince never answered any questions. The pilot had to learn from chance phrases that the little prince just happened to mention. For example, when he saw the airplane, he said, "Oh, you came out of the sky too. What planet do you come from?" And the aviator said, "Do you come from a different planet?" And the little prince said, "It's true. On that," meaning the airplane, "you can't have come from very far." The aviator was so proud of his airplane, but the little prince says it's just like a little rowboat. You can't go far in it. The little prince has come from another planet. Another thing that they find out is that the little prince planet is very small. See here? It's about as big as a house. And the little prince doesn't need anything to tie up his sheep with, because the sheep can wander anywhere. Straight ahead of him, he can't go very far. He'll never get lost. And this comment, anywhere, straight ahead of him. Straight ahead of him, nobody can go very far, is a quote that many people quote from the little prince. And they ponder it deeply. Straight ahead of him, nobody can go very far. They don't really know what that means. Maybe it means you have to wander. There's a phrase in a book called The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien that has been quoted very often. The phrase is, "Not everybody who wanders is lost." To wander is to go around without an aim or without a goal, just looking at things and experiencing things. Chapter 4. The planet the little prince came from is probably asteroid B612. It was discovered by a Turkish astronomer who had a big telescope, and when he went to the astronomy conference to say he had found a new planet, he gave his presentation in Turkish costume, which looks a lot like a clown, and nobody believed him because grown-ups are that way. But the next year, a dictator made a law that on pain of death, all of the Turks had to adopt Western dress. So he came back and made his same presentation, dressed in elegant splendor, and everybody believed him. I'm on page 16 of mine. I'm not sure what page it is of yours. Let's see. Probably page 14 of yours. On page 14 it says, "If I have told you these details about the asteroid and made a note of its number for you, it is on account of the grown-ups and their ways." On account of means because of. It is for the sake of the grown-ups. Grown-ups love figures. Do Do you love figures? Let's see what he means by that. When you tell them that you have made a new friend, they never ask you any questions about essential matters. They never say to you, what does his voice sound like? What games does he love best? Does he collect butterflies? Instead, they demand, how old is he? How many brothers does he have? That's what we would say. How much does he weigh? How much money does his father make? Only from these figures do they think they have learned anything about him. It's so true. If you were to say to a grown-up, I saw a beautiful house made of rosy brick with geraniums in the windows and doves on the roof, they would not be able to get any idea of the house. You would have to say to them, I saw a house that cost $20,000. Then they would exclaim, oh, what a pretty house that is. Really, they would say, oh, wow, that must have been beautiful. It must be a beautiful house, is what we would really say. But true. You can't get a picture as a grown-up of what a house looks like if you don't know how much it costs. Because a house could be made of rosy brick with geraniums in the window and doves on the roof and be a slum. Or it could be a mansion. I can understand I have had to grow old. Just so, you might say to them, the proof that the little prince existed is that he was charming, that he laughed, and that he was looking for a sheep. If anyone wants a sheep, that is proof he exists. What philosophy this is. I think, therefore I am. If you need proof of his existence, the proof is that he laughs, and he is charming, and he is looking for a sheep. If anyone is looking for a sheep, it is proof he exists. I love the philosophy in this book. And what good would it do to tell them that? They would shrug their shoulders and treat you like a child. But if you said to them, the planet he came from is asteroid B612, then they would be convinced and leave you in peace from their questions. They are like that. One must not hold it against them. In other words, one must be patient. You should be patient with grown-ups. Children should always show great forbearance toward grown-up people. We think of it that adults have to show patience with children, but it goes the other way as well. The childlike must show great forbearance with the sensible, in a negative sense. Childlike people are not always very sensitive. But certainly for us who understand life, figures are a matter of indifference. That means we don't care about figures. Who cares? I should have liked to begin this story in the fashion of fairy tales. I should have liked to say, by the way, I should have liked is just a way of saying I would have liked. Should have liked is a variant form of would. It doesn't mean anything different. I would have liked to say, once upon a time there was a little prince who lived on a planet that was scarcely any bigger than himself and who had need of a sheep. To those who understand life, that would have given a much greater air of truth to my story. Air of truth means the story would have been more believable to those who understand life. For I do not want anyone to read my book carelessly. In other words, this was an important book to the author, and it really was. I have suffered too much grief in setting down these memories. 6 years have already passed since my friend went away from me with his sheep. If I try to describe him here, it is to make sure that I shall not forget him. To forget a friend is sad. Not everyone has had a friend. And if I forget him, I may become like the grown-ups, who are no longer interested in anything but figures. This passage moves me because, for one thing, I have a bad memory. I do forget my friends. I can forget people. Now I take pictures of people when they come to the house and put them up on my wall with their name and a little comment about what we did together so that I won't forget them. And when he says, it's sad to forget a friend, not everyone has had a friend. I read somewhere that a majority of men perhaps never have a good friend. They have drinking buddies, they have associates from work, they have acquaintances, but someone with whom they can discuss that which they ponder deeply? No. And this guy is afraid that if he forgets the little prince, he'll become like the grown-ups. That's a frightening thing to him. I want to remember my friends who kept me young. It is for that purpose again that I have bought a box of paints and some pencils. It is hard to take up drawing again at my age when I have never made any pictures except those of the boa constrictor from the outside and the boa constrictor from the inside since I was 6. I shall certainly try to make my portraits as true to life as possible, but I am not at all sure of success. One drawing goes along all right and the other has no resemblance to its subject. I make some errors, too, in the little prince's height. In one place he is too tall, and in another too short. And I feel some doubts about the color of his costume. So I fumble along as best I can, doing my best, now good, now bad, and hope generally fair to middling. Fair to middling means I am getting a medium grade, partially good, partially bad. Fair to middling, okay. In certain more important details I shall make mistakes also, but that is something that will not be my fault. My friend never explained anything to me. He thought perhaps that I was like himself, but I, alas, do not know how to see sheep through the walls of boxes. Perhaps I'm a little like the grown-ups. I have had to grow old. I am a little like the grown-ups, but I'm also like the little prince. I've tried all my life to be like the little prince, to have a youthful perspective, hopeful, optimistic. I hope you're going to like this book. I love this book. I'm sure you can find it read in Portuguese so you can hear it. You can also find it read in English by someone other than me. So it's a good book to listen to get the music of the language. I will see you next week with the second installment of The Little Prince. Feel free to leave me comments on the page. I'd love to see your comments. See you later. Bye-bye.